What a roller coaster this week was turning out to be. Yesterday, you'd had your first guitar lesson with Uncle Mike and met your first friend. You hoped you'd see Shinsou at school tomorrow. Meanwhile, it was Sunday, and you had a meeting with the social workers who were overseeing the adoption process. You hurried to get ready and come downstairs. Aizawa was waiting for you. You stopped short and stared. He looked so classy. Clean-shaven, hair combed and gelled back, and he even had on a suit. Whoa, you gawked. He gave you a dry glance.
Are you ready?
Yep, you replied, happy as you remembered that it was all part of making the adoption become official. The drive wasn't too long. Once there, Aizawa was asked to wait while you went into a room and talked to a counselor, a social worker, and a couple other people in turn. They asked you about how you were settling in and about your well-being and some other random questions that sounded like a test of some sort. You just answered everything honestly, telling them how Aizawa helped you with your nightmares and stuff. Then it was your turn to wait outside while they talked with Aizawa. You fidgeted in your chair, restless. Aizawa's point of view. "Eraserhead," said the social worker at the desk in front of him. "This is quite the undertaking, you do realize." Aizawa took in her question with a neutral expression, noticing the psychologist standing beside her, and wondering the reason for his presence.
"I'm aware,"
he replied evenly. The social worker and psychologist glanced at each other. Then the psychologist spoke.
"It seems that because of her traumatic past, Aiko suffers from PTSD. In her case, this means that strongly unpleasant feelings and memories will resurface, sometimes at random, and sometimes when triggered. She will need consistent support and a sense of security with her condition."
The social worker spoke up. "Your situation isn't ideal for childcare. Single parenthood is difficult, and you seem to have an extremely busy career with hero work and teaching. We know of several other situations which might better suit her. What makes you think that you are prepared to support Aiko the way she needs?" Aizawa met their gazes evenly, suppressing his glower. Once, he might have agreed with their evaluation, but now... He stood, staring into their eyes.
"In the past few weeks, Aiko has made immense progress. She no longer hides her quirk. She has started to think for herself and develop her own preferences and interests. She even befriends others. I am aware that she hasn't overcome all her challenges, but to move her now, at the risk of interrupting her progress, would be irrational."
He lowered his stare in a mild glower. "Very well, Eraserhead," the social worker responded. "In 1 month we will reevaluate her mental state. If she has continued to progress, as you say, then we will finalize the adoption. If not, we will have to think of what is best for Aiko." Aizawa bowed stiffly, acknowledging the arrangement before making an exit. You could sense Aizawa's brooding mood as he drove you home, and it confused you. He was thinking about his meetings with Detective Tsukauchi, and the danger you were potentially in because of your past. He had to protect you. Had to see you keep progressing. Once, he would have agreed that he was the least rational choice for raising you, but now, he didn't trust anyone else with that role. It was like Mike had said. His mind flashed back to that conversation. "Seems like you're becoming attached, Shota," Mike had remarked with a grin. He lowered his gaze, intense green eyes observant. "Does this have to do with Shirakumo?" Aizawa had interrupted.
"If you have something to say, make sure it's on topic. I don't have much time to chat, and my priority is strategizing for Aiko's safety."
Mike had lifted his hands in a calming, shrugging gesture. "Just thinking out loud. It's been a while since I've seen you this invested." "Hey, Dad? Is something wrong?" Your voice brought Aizawa back to the present. He glanced at you as you stared at him curiously from the back seat. He couldn't underestimate your perceptiveness.
"Everything is fine, problem child,"
he assured, making a conscious effort to give off normal vibes instead of dark, brooding vibes. It worked, Aizawa was pretty convincing when he wanted someone to believe something. Okay, you replied, feeling better. The sunlight streamed in through your side window. So warm. You were asleep in moments. Aizawa parked the car, glancing at you and noting your closed eyes and how you slumped sideways in your seat. Your cat ears twitched as you dreamed. A bit of sunlight was enough to knock you out? You really were a cat. He opened the door for you. You still didn't wake up. Were you that tired? Sighing at the inconvenience, he lifted you up, supporting your weight on his hip and laying your head on his shoulder as though carrying a toddler. Your arms wrapped around his neck sleepily. His heart flip-flopped with warmth, and the feeling shocked him. He stood there, thoughts racing. He'd avoided any attachments deeper than he could handle losing after Shirakumo. He thought that he could still be there for people without really letting them in. When had he made you an exception to that? Was Mike right? He brought you up to your room and lowered you onto your sleeping bag, gently detaching your hands from his neck. You curled up sleepily, and the sunlight slanting through the window provided you with glowing warmth. Aizawa sighed. As cute as you were when napping like a cat, he couldn't let you sleep too long or you wouldn't go to sleep at bedtime, and tomorrow was a school day for you. The next day, you couldn't wait to go to school. You were going to see Shinsou again. You got ready way earlier than necessary. It was barely dawn. You felt so restless. You looked around for something to do. Your room was already clean. You went downstairs. The dishes were already done. You went back upstairs. You stood, looking around your room in the faint blue light of dawn. The guitars on your wall gleamed. Your fingers itched to pick them up, and you followed the urge by gently taking the acoustic guitar down. You didn't want to wake Aizawa up. You went outside and hopped up on the wall, careful to keep from scratching the guitar. You closed your eyes, playing the chords Mike had taught you. After a few minutes, a familiar voice asked,
"Why are you up so early, problem child?"
You started in surprise. Aizawa stared out at the city as he sat next to you on the wall. He looked like an absolute wreck, hair messier than usual, dark circles lining his sleep-deprived eyes. "Well," you replied, "I was too excited to sleep." Aizawa glanced at you dryly, the corners of his mouth tugging up slightly. "You know," you continued, "my cat ears can usually pick up really soft sounds. Even though I was playing guitar, I'm surprised I didn't hear you coming." Aizawa didn't react, continuing to gaze out at the city.
"No hero has only one trick."
You smiled. Your dad was so cool. Aizawa spoke up again.
"Aiko, don't come up on the wall or leave the yard when I'm not with you. Agreed?"
You looked at him curiously. Why? Before living with Aizawa, you'd wandered around this area all the time as a cat, so you were pretty used to it. He paused.
"There's an issue with some villains that I need to resolve first. Until then, it's not safe. You don't need to worry about it, but can I trust you to follow my rules?"
"Yeah, I'll do that," you replied, still puzzled. They must be pretty tricky villains if Aizawa hadn't already caught them. The conversation lapsed into silence. You stayed like that, reassured by Aizawa's calm presence, while the sky gradually lightened, until it was finally time to eat and get dropped off to school. You nearly exploded with happiness when you walked down the hall of your school, entered your classroom, and saw Shinsou sitting in the back like he said he would be. His purple eyes noticed you and observed as you approached with a grin. He looked wary. A sudden thought occurred to you. You glanced sideways at the boy who was sitting in the desk to the left of Shinsou. "Hey, you!" You waved to get his attention. "Can I trade desks with you?" The boy looked at you like you were crazy. "Yeah, sure," he agreed in a heartbeat. He grabbed his things and went up to the front to claim your desk. "What are you doing?" Shinsou hissed. You smiled as you sat down. "Sitting by you, obviously." It was actually the perfect spot. Shinsou on one side, window on the other. You smiled with cat-like satisfaction. The teacher raised an eyebrow when he entered and saw the seat swap. He addressed the boy who'd traded with you.
Why are you in Aiko's seat?
She wanted to trade.
The teacher looked at you. Aiko, can you come with me for a moment?
He stepped into the hallway.
You got up and nervously followed.
The teacher closed the classroom door so that the other students wouldn't hear anything.
Aiko, were you pressured into switching seats?
No, you denied hurriedly.
The teacher looked skeptical.
You hurried to explain. I wanted to sit next to Shinsou. He's the only one I know here.
The teacher's eyes widened. You and him are friends?
He still looked skeptical,
like he wasn't sure if you were just covering for someone.
You suddenly felt indignant. Did you really seem so timid and soft-spoken that he had to assume you'd been pressured? Your amber eyes started to spark. You'd show him otherwise. Shinsou is my first friend. We like the same pro heroes, and he gets me even though I don't know how to talk to people. Swapping seats is what I want.
The teacher eyed you. Very well, he acknowledged, but know that you can come talk to me if you ever have any trouble.
You stared unblinkingly, annoyed at the implication of his words.
He sighed and opened the classroom door.
You nimbly wove between the desks and bounced back into your seat as the teacher asked everyone to get out their notebooks. Shinsou looked surprised that the teacher had allowed you to go through with the swap, but he didn't say anything. As the lecture went on, you decided that you liked the back of the classroom way better than the front. Not only did you get to be near Shinsou, but you could also observe all of your classmates. With surprise, you noticed two boys who seemed familiar, seated near the middle of the classroom. One was lanky with grown-out blonde hair. The other had a stronger build with a neat buzz cut. They looked relaxed. The blonde one glanced over his shoulder to look at Shinsou, eyes narrowing into bright slits of anger. Did they still resent Shinsou for sending them away with brainwash? You glowered at the backs of their heads. That was stupid. They were the ones who tried to start a fight with him. Shinsou didn't seem to notice, his purple gaze calmly moving down the equation sheet they'd been given. Lunch break finally came, and you grabbed Shinsou's wrist and pulled him after you, despite his protests. You brought him up to the school roof. You liked rooftops. Shinsou stood, panting, holding his lunchbox.
What was that for? He demanded in annoyance.
I like it here, you replied simply. You could perceive his annoyance without problem. Reading people was no issue. But you just felt so comfortable around grumpy people, thanks to Aizawa. You sat down next to him, unwrapping your lunch. Tuna sandwich! You stared in delight. Aizawa had been making them on the regular ever since he'd noticed how much you liked them. Shinsou watched you.
Why are you doing this? He questioned.
You cocked your head in confusion.
Why are you befriending me?
He clarified. Oh, you felt taken aback. You stared at your tuna sandwich. I guess because I feel comfortable around you. And I just have this sense that you're a really good person. Those were the last reasons Shinsou ever expected to hear. Most people he'd met felt the opposite of comfortable around him, and as for their assumptions about his character, he rubbed the back of his neck, confused.
How do you know?
He demanded coldly. Your amber eyes examined him. I guess I don't. But my cat instincts have never been wrong. That's how I knew I could trust Dad. Aizawa, too. Shinsou stared at you, not sure what to make of that. You smiled. You're my first friend, Shinsou. I hope I'm doing this right. He chuckled. He couldn't help it. You were earnest and unbound by social norms. Your smile widened. Anyways, thanks, Shinsou.
What for?
He glanced at you in confusion. Well, you hesitated. For being my first friend, even though I don't have a clue what I'm doing. You totally already know how to talk to people, so I'm sure you could be hanging out with someone else right now. Shinsou felt a stab of coldness at his own memories. He'd always been surrounded by people, and yet totally alone. "No," he replied. You stared in surprise. "You're my first friend, too." You felt a shock. "What?" He turned to look at you and grinned dryly. "Not everyone has cat instincts." It took you a long moment to process this information. Then you leapt to your feet. "Well, they're all missing out then. But you know what? Good! This means I have a shot at getting more of your time." You pumped your fist enthusiastically, as though you'd just scored big time. Shinsou pushed your head down to quell your enthusiasm, ruffling your hair. You sputtered indignantly and blew your own hair out of your face. "Knock it off! Hair dye?" "My hair," Shinsou replied smugly, "is natural." You pouted. That was obviously true, from his matching eyes and eyebrows, but you'd at least hoped to get a reaction. Insults were not your forte. Neither were compliments, come to think of it. You remembered your attempts when first meeting Shinsou. The door to the rooftop opened unexpectedly while you were still trying to sort out your messy hair, but you recognized the obnoxious voices and snapped upright. "Shinsou, we need to talk to you alone. Ask your friend to leave." It was that blonde guy who had been glaring at Shinsou. Sano was his name. You pushed your hair back out of your face, your hand shadowing your eyes as you glared at the speaker. He stared at you, eyes narrowing like he was trying to figure you out. "What do you guys want?" Shinsou sounded bored. They folded their arms, not responding, and instead looked pointedly at you. "I'm not going to let you talk to Shinsou without me," you asserted. They scowled, and Shinsou looked surprised. "Were you protecting him?" "Fine," growled the bigger boy, Kai, cracking his knuckles. You chuckled. "Really? Ooh, you're so scary and tough." His eyes widened as he realized that you were mocking him, and then his face filled with fury. Your body filled with adrenaline. They were going to fight. It was obvious from their stances and expressions. You stood in front of Shinsou, and for a second, you felt full of confidence. Even as the fist came swinging at you, you knew that you were faster and stronger than this boy. You could dodge or block easily. Two things happened in rapid succession. First, your mind suddenly filled with terror and images of your uncle in the past, so powerfully as to make you lose touch with your surroundings. You lost your balance and stumbled. And the second thing was the boy's fist suddenly turning to weighted titanium. Your eyes widened. The punch crashed into your gut, knocking the wind out of you and literally sending you flying and bouncing across the rooftop until you rolled to a stop. "Aiko!" Shinsou yelled. You didn't move. You looked unconscious. Shinsou turned back to the two boys who were grinning over him, and lost it. Tears pricked at his eyes as he shouted without caring about the consequences. "Sano! Kai! What do you want? I thought you said you'd be my friend no matter what! I thought you wanted to be a hero! Look at Aiko! What kind of hero does that? You guys are pathetic! Can you feel how pathetic you are?" Shinsou's quirk was in full force, awaiting activation as he shouted, but Sano and Kai didn't respond. Sano, the lanky blonde, touched Shinsou lightly on the forehead. He was suddenly unable to move. That was Sano's quirk. He could cause partial paralysis by touching you. It only lasted 5 minutes, though, and Shinsou could still move, almost imperceptibly. His lips trembled with the effort of speaking. He simply couldn't move fast enough for understandable speech. He couldn't even move his eyes. "This sure is fun to see," Kai chuckled. Sano smiled. "You wondered what we wanted, Shinsou? You made us look like mindless idiots the other day. We wanted to show you exactly how worthless you and your quirk really are when you don't have us backing you up." He bent closer to whisper in Shinsou's ear. "Name one other person in this school who doesn't fear you, huh? People hate what they fear. You're alone. All alone." He laughed. "Until you agree to cooperate with our ideas, as the friend you claimed you were." "Wanna take a swing at him, Kai?" Kai didn't answer. Sano turned in confusion. The tall boy was standing stock still, mouth open, empty-eyed. Oh no. He turned back to Shinsou, infuriated. They'd been tricked! Shinsou's brainwash suddenly activated on him. Sano's hands dropped to his sides as he stared blankly. Shinsou trembled as he resisted the paralysis. It was a standoff. Shinsou had asked the questions before Sano had paralyzed him. They didn't seem to realize that paralysis wouldn't stop him from brainwashing them at any time once they responded. Asking the questions was physical, but the activation was only mental. But they were partly right. He couldn't give them any commands until he could speak. The minutes of paralysis seemed to take forever. Shinsou was painfully aware of the fact that he hadn't heard a sound from Aiko. The paralysis wore off abruptly, causing Shinsou's knees to buckle. It was like the sensation of a foot falling asleep over his entire body. He gave his orders through numb lips. Stay here and don't move. Then he got up on jello legs and ran over to Aiko. But what happened? She wasn't there. It was just a cat? The black cat lay on its side looking almost like it was napping, except for the awkward sprawl of its paws. It was Aiko. It had to be Aiko. It was too small for a full-grown cat. His hands hovered over you tremblingly. What should he do? What if you had spine damage? Should he move you? He checked your pulse, relieved to feel that it was steady, along with your breathing. The cat stirred, amber eyes blinking open partially, then painfully got to its feet. Aiko, Shinsou whispered. Your amber eyes blinked at him. Why are you a cat? Can you change back? Or talk? You looked away. I guess not, Shinsou muttered. He was glad to see that you could still move, but your movement seemed painful and stiff, especially for a cat. I'm going to leave Sano and Kai up here on the roof. I want them to stay on the scene so that they can get in trouble for knocking you out like that. You blinked. That seemed to be a yes for you. You started walking towards the door. Your stiff movements were painful to watch. Shinsou knew how to hold cats, so he scooped you up. Your small paws flopped comfortably over the top of his arms. You didn't resist, probably because you were too exhausted. He felt scared. He had to get proper medical attention for you quickly. He had no idea how injured you were, or why you were a cat. He ran carefully, gasping for breath as he threw open the classroom door. It was empty. Lunch break wouldn't be over for another 30 minutes. He ran the fingers of his free hand through his hair in agitation. He had no idea where the staff went over lunch. And would they even know how to help you? Who would know? He checked his pocket for change. He should have enough. 5 minutes later, he climbed out of a cab in front of UA. A robotic voice spoke through the intercom as he approached the open gate.
State your business, please.
I need to see Eraserhead. Hello, it's Anyake, recording her outro on a very low-quality microphone. The next part is already written. I'll upload it as soon as I can. I'm trying to stick to a schedule of once a week, but that is subject to change, depending on how chaotic my life is. I'm pretty invested in these character arcs, and in the plot ideas I have, so I will definitely see it all the way through. As usual, everything is linked in the description. Previous parts of the story, future parts of the story, once they're uploaded, and so on. I hope you guys take care of yourselves and have a great day. Remember to drink water, get enough sleep, and do what you can for the people around you. Remember that I care about your well-being. I'm sending you a big hug through my voice. Take care.